The sun hadn't fully risen over Manhattan when Adrian Cole stumbled out of his black Mercedes S-Class, his shirt half-buttoned, eyes burning from champagne and guilt. He'd spent the night at the Ritz-Carlton with Tessa, the young PR assistant who worshipped his power and whispered lies that fed his ego. The city was quiet at 6:20 a.m., but the silence felt heavy, as if New York itself knew what he'd done. He pressed the elevator button, clutching his Cartier watch like a talisman. On the 28th floor, the doors opened to the scent of Grace's favorite perfume, Dior J'adore, drifting faintly through the corridor. His heart skipped. Maybe she was still asleep. Maybe he could shower, erase the smell of betrayal, and lie his way back into her arms once more. But when he opened the door, the world stopped. Grace was sitting in the living room, straight-backed, calm, eyes like glass. Her pale silk robe caught the light from the giant windows overlooking Park Avenue. Beside her, a woman in a navy suit closed a MacBook and rose to her feet. "Mr. Cole," she said evenly, "I'm Naomi Park, Grace's attorney." Adrian froze, his mind blurred. "Attorney?" Grace's hands trembled slightly, but her voice didn't. "I know where you were last night," she said softly. "And I know who you were with." Naomi slid a manila envelope across the marble table. Inside were printed photos from hotel security, Adrian and Tessa, walking arm in arm through the Ritz-Carlton lobby at 1:12 a.m. There were receipts from the suite, a room under his corporate card, and there were divorce papers already signed by Grace. "You're making a mistake," he stammered, voice rising. "You think you can trap me like this?" Naomi remained calm. "The court has already approved a temporary freeze on all joint accounts. You can't withdraw a cent." Fuda. Adrian's face drained of color. He glanced at Grace's wife of 5 years, the woman who once believed he was her world, and for the first time, he saw something colder than anger. Resolve. Grace stood slowly, one hand resting on her belly. "I'm 13 weeks pregnant," she whispered. "You won't hurt us anymore." For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Pregnant? He hadn't known. The air thickened. Manhattan's skyline burned golden behind her, framing the image of a woman who'd stopped waiting to be saved. Adrian tried to step forward, but Naomi blocked him with quiet authority. "We'll let the court handle the rest," she said. Grace picked up her phone, her voice barely audible but firm. "Pack your things, Adrian. You have until tonight." He stared at her, lost between disbelief and rage. The man who once ruled her world now stood powerless in his own home. And then Naomi added, "Oh, and one more thing. Someone's already talking to the FBI about your company's offshore transfers." Adrian's eyes widened. Grace didn't look back. She turned away, leaving him standing in the wreckage of his own lies. 2 days before that morning, Grace Miller was sitting alone in the kitchen of their Park Avenue apartment, scrolling through emails on her silver MacBook Pro. The coffee in her Tiffany blue mug had gone cold, untouched. Adrian had left the night before for what he called a corporate dinner, the kind that usually ended with a hangover and a late arrival home. She wanted to believe him. She'd spent years convincing herself that men like him, powerful, charming, and ambitious, just worked too much. But that night, something shifted. When she picked up his iPhone to silence an incoming message, the screen lit up with a notification. Ritz C, Suite 1103 confirmed for A. Cole. Her stomach tightened. She opened the thread messages from Tessa V. The words were short, impulsive, dripping with intimacy. "Can't wait to see you again tonight. You make me forget the rules." Grace stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Her first instinct was denial. Then came the shaking hands, the thudding heartbeat. She took a slow breath and remembered Naomi's words from a year ago when they'd met at a charity gala. "When you start feeling something's wrong, Grace, don't panic. Prepare." That night, Grace prepared. She pulled up the family iCloud account and mirrored Adrian's data. Every photo, every receipt, every text. Then she found something worse. A PDF of a corporate transfer $500,000 from his firm's charity fund to an account labeled Tessa Vale PR Solutions. The transaction was dated 2 weeks ago, signed under Cole Holdings. Grace's name appeared as the second authorization. He had used her digital signature. Her chest ached as she printed the file and slipped it into a folder. It wasn't just betrayal now, it was potential ruin. If this leaked, she'd be complicit in financial fraud. By midnight, Grace sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by papers, receipts, and snapshots of their life together. Wedding photos, birthday cards, credit statements, lies hiding under luxury. Her reflection in the glass window looked fragile, but determined. She called Naomi Park. The lawyer's tone was calm, but sharp. "Grace, listen to me. You're not just dealing with adultery. You're sitting on a financial bomb. We move tonight." Within hours, Naomi was at her door, wearing her navy trench coat and holding a sleek black Mont Blanc pen. Together, they built a timeline, transfers, hotel receipts, photos, and witness logs from the building's concierge, who'd seen Adrian escorting Tessa late at night. Naomi promised to prepare a temporary court order to freeze assets before Adrian caught wind. But as Grace gathered the last pieces of evidence, she found something that broke her more than the affair: an ultrasound appointment reminder, saved under calendar, delete, after. The date was tomorrow. Her own scan. He'd known she was pregnant. He'd still gone to the Ritz. Tears blurred her vision. He knew, she whispered. Naomi placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Then make him know what losing you feels like." The next morning, Grace went to the ultrasound alone. The nurse smiled warmly, unaware that the man who should have been there was in another woman's bed. When she saw the tiny heartbeat flickering on the screen, she bit her lip to keep from crying out loud. Outside, the wind cut cold down Park Avenue. She called Naomi again. "Do it," she said. "File the papers." That night, Naomi prepared the envelope. Grace printed the photos, stapled the receipts, and sealed them with shaking hands. She placed them on the marble table by the window, where sunlight would hit them at dawn. She didn't sleep. She sat in silence, watching the Manhattan skyline flicker and fade, waiting for the sun that would expose everything. And when it finally rose, she was ready to end the lie. The following evening, Grace forced herself to attend the annual charity gala at the Plaza Hotel. It had been planned for months, a night meant to honor Adrian's company for its ethical leadership. The irony stung. Naomi advised her to go, to stay calm, to act as if nothing had happened until the court orders were in effect. "You need to let the world see him before they see the evidence," Naomi had said. So Grace dressed with quiet precision. She slipped into a black Dior gown that fit like armor, swept her hair into a neat bun, and painted her lips crimson. Every motion felt like holding her breath underwater. She wasn't going for beauty. She was going for control. When the car pulled up to the plaza, the flash of cameras was blinding. Manhattan's elite glittered under chandeliers and champagne lights. The orchestra hummed softly while waiters carried trays of caviar and champagne flutes. Grace smiled for the cameras, the same way she'd always done beside Adrian, except this time, she was smiling at the man who had no idea his world was about to collapse. He greeted her with a rehearsed grin, his arm wrapping around her waist. "You look stunning," he whispered, lips close to her ear. She caught the faint scent of Tessa's perfume on his collar. Her body stiffened. Reporters swarmed them. "Mr. Cole, rumors say your firm may face an audit. Care to comment?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "No comment," he snapped, ushering Grace inside. As they entered the ballroom, whispers followed like a current. Grace could feel eyes tracing the invisible crack in their perfect marriage. She knew why someone had already leaked the Ritz-Carlton photos. The images were circulating through Manhattan's gossip circuit faster than champagne could pour. She caught sight of Tessa across the room, glittering silver dress, red lipstick, smug smile. The young woman raised her glass in a mocking toast. Grace's pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. She moved toward the bar, keeping her composure. Then came the cruelty. A woman from Adrian's inner circle leaned in and said, just loud enough for others to hear, "It's brave of you to come out tonight, Grace. Not everyone could handle public embarrassment." Another giggled. "She's a saint, isn't she? Pretending nothing's wrong while her husband plays house with his assistant." The laughter stung sharper than knives. Grace steadied her glass of sparkling water, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had dreamed of this crowd's acceptance for years. Now she saw it for what it was. A stage built on hypocrisy. And then, as if fate wanted to drive the blade deeper, Adrian took the microphone. "Tonight," he began, voice smooth as ever, "We celebrate integrity, partnership, and love." The word love made Grace's stomach twist. The applause roared. Cameras flashed. Tessa clapped too, her smile gleaming like poison. Grace's vision blurred. She excused herself, walking out to the terrace overlooking Fifth Avenue. The night air was cool, the city below pulsing with indifferent beauty. For a long time, she just stood there, watching the skyline, the same skyline that had witnessed her loyalty, her silence, her heartbreak. A waiter approached quietly, placing a napkin on the railing. "Mom," he murmured. "Someone asked me to give this to you." "One." She frowned, unfolding the napkin. Inside was a small USB drive taped to it, and a handwritten note. "You don't know me, but you need to see what's inside. It's time you know everything." Her pulse spiked. She looked around, but no one lingered. Adrian was still inside, laughing beneath crystal lights. Grace closed her fingers around the USB. For the first time, fear mixed with a flicker of hope, because, maybe, just maybe, someone else knew the truth, and the game had just begun. Grace didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window of her Park Avenue apartment, the lights of Manhattan flickering across her tear-stained face. The tiny USB lay on the table beside her untouched cup of chamomile tea. She turned it over in her hand again and again, wondering if this was another trap or salvation. At 2 a.m., she finally plugged it into her MacBook. The screen lit up with a single folder labeled, "For her eyes only." Her pulse thundered in her ears as she clicked. Inside were 4 video files and a scanned ledger. The first video opened to the Ritz-Carlton lobby security feed. Adrian and Tessa walked arm in arm, laughing, unaware of the camera above them. The timestamp matched the receipts Grace had already gathered. Nothing new until the second video began. This one was grainier, taken inside a dim conference room. Adrian sat across from an older man, his father, Raymond Cole, CEO of Cole Holdings. On the table between them was a thick envelope, $500,000 to Tessa's firm, Raymond said coldly. And another 2 into that Cayman account. Use Grace's name. The charity angle keeps the IRS quiet. Adrian nodded, signing documents with his Montblanc pen. And if she finds out? Raymond smirked. She won't. She's too loyal for her own good. Grace's breath caught. She froze, staring at the paused frame of 2 men she once trusted. One she loved, one she'd called family. The ledger confirmed it all. Fraudulent transfers, money laundered through her name, her foundation used as a cover. Her entire life, her reputation, her career had been weaponized without her knowing. She pressed her hands to her mouth to keep from screaming. Every camera flash at the plaza, every whisper, every fake smile suddenly made sense. She hadn't just been betrayed as a wife. She'd been framed as a criminal. Her phone buzzed. It was Naomi. "Grace, are you awake?" Her voice shook. "I saw the videos." Naomi's tone hardened. "Don't send them to anyone yet. If those files are authentic, we're dealing with corporate fraud at the federal level. That means the FBI, not just divorce court." Grace's mind spun. "But they used my name, Naomi. I signed documents I didn't even understand. What if they arrest me? Not if we get ahead of it. I'll call in a forensic accountant I trust. For now, disconnect everything. If Adrian finds out you have those files, you could be in danger." 10. Grace deleted all traces from the desktop and hid the USB inside the hollow base of a crystal vase, a wedding gift from Raymond himself. The irony twisted in her chest, but sleep never came. At dawn, she walked to Central Park, her coat clutched tight around her. The crisp air bit at her skin, but her mind was somewhere else, flashing back to every dinner table conversation where Adrian and Raymond had talked about building a legacy. She finally saw what that legacy really was. Deceit, dressed in luxury. By morning, Naomi arrived at her apartment with 2 cups of Starbucks coffee and a file folder. "We'll use this, Grace, but we'll do it quietly. If we move too soon, they'll bury us before we can speak." Grace nodded, exhausted but resolute. "Then we play their game better than they ever did." Naomi smiled faintly. "That's the spirit." Grace looked back at the hidden vase glowing in the morning light. She had no idea that the proof she'd just found could either save her or destroy her entirely. The next afternoon, rain poured across Manhattan, streaking the glass walls of Grace's apartment like tears she refused to shed. Naomi had left an hour ago after reviewing the USB evidence, instructing her to stay calm, to avoid confrontation, to let the system work. But the system had never protected her before, and deep down, Grace knew monsters didn't wait for courts, they struck first. At 4:15 p.m., the intercom buzzed. "Miss Miller, someone's here to see you. Says it's personal." Grace hesitated. She wasn't expecting anyone. "Who is it?" "Miss Vale," the doorman replied. The name hit her like a slap. "Tessa." Before she could respond, the elevator light blinked. The door opened, and there she was, Tessa Vale, 26. Immaculately dressed in a beige trench coat and red heels, holding a Chanel bag like it was armor. Her lipstick matched the color of arrogance. "Hello, Grace," Tessa said sweetly, stepping inside as if she owned the place. "We need to talk." Grace's voice was cold. "You shouldn't be here." "Oh, relax," Tessa cooed, walking toward the living room window. "I'm not here to steal your husband. I already did that." Grace felt her jaw tighten but didn't move. "What do you want?" Tessa smiled, pulling an envelope from her bag. "Consider this a warning. Adrian's lawyers are preparing to file a restraining order. They'll claim you're unstable, jealous, and emotionally unfit to raise a child. Unless," she paused, tilting her head, "unless you quietly sign the divorce without contest." Grace's pulse spiked. "You think I'll just walk away?" Tessa shrugged, glancing around the penthouse. "You'll have to. Adrian's father already spoke to the board. Your reputation's finished. Once the tabloids publish what's coming, you'll be lucky to get a job at a cafe. Bye." Grace stared, her hands trembling, but her voice stayed steady. "You're bluffing." "Oh, honey." Tessa laughed softly. "You don't understand. Adrian doesn't lose. He destroys something inside." Grace cracked, but not in fear. In clarity, she turned, picking up a small remote and pressing a button. "Funny you say that," she murmured. A soft beep sounded. Behind a vase on the bookshelf, a discreet red light blinked. Naomi's hidden camera. It had recorded every word since Tessa stepped through the door. Tessa frowned. "What was that?" "Nothing," Grace said calmly, sitting down. "Would you like some tea?" Tessa sneered. "You really are pathetic." She tossed the envelope on the table. "Sign it, or we'll make sure everyone believes you used your charity to launder money. There's evidence. You know." Grace's heart skipped. Evidence? That meant Tessa knew about the USB or thought she did. Grace needed her to talk. "You really think Adrian will protect you?" Grace asked. Tessa's smirk faltered for a second. "He loves me," she said, but the words sounded unsure. Grace leaned forward. "Then why did he meet another woman at the Ritz last week?" Tessa's eyes flashed. "You're lying." "Am I?" Tessa's face twisted. "You don't know him like I do," she hissed. "He'd never risk everything for you or for me." Grace saw it then, the flicker of fear beneath Tessa's defiance. The mistress wasn't in control. She was disposable. As Tessa stormed out, Grace whispered softly, "The truth always finds a way." The elevator doors closed behind her with a metallic thud. Grace turned toward the bookshelf. The camera's red light blinked steadily. Every threat, every lie, every name Tessa had dropped was now evidence. She exhaled shakily, touching her belly. "You tried to scare the wrong woman." The storm outside cracked with thunder, echoing through the empty apartment. But what Grace didn't know was that by nightfall, Adrian would learn she had the USB, and this time, he wouldn't come alone. The knock came just after midnight. A hard, deliberate rhythm that made Grace's heart freeze. She wasn't expecting anyone. Naomi had warned her to keep the doors locked, to call the police if Adrian appeared. But fear didn't wait for logic. It clawed its way up her throat as she stood barefoot in the dim apartment, her silk robe brushing the floor. Another knock. Louder. "Grace, open the damn door." Adrian's voice thundered through the hall. For a long second, she stood still, staring at the handle as it rattled. Then she turned on the small recording app Naomi had installed on her phone, took a deep breath, and unlatched the lock. Adrian stormed in, rain dripping from his coat, his eyes wild. "You've lost your mind," he spat. "Tessa told me you threatened her." Grace crossed her arms, voice steady. She came here uninvited. She brought threats, not tea. One. He laughed bitterly. You set her up. You're trying to ruin me because you can't handle losing control. Grace's lips trembled, but she refused to look away. I lost control the moment I believed you were a good man. Adrian paced like a caged animal, running a hand through his soaked hair. You have no idea what you've done. The board knows about your little accusations. My father's furious. You're dragging my name through the mud. Or name. 1. Our name died at the Ritz-Carlton, she shot back. His expression darkened. You want to talk about betrayal? You were nothing before me. I gave you this life, this apartment, those clothes, everything. Grace's chest heaved. You gave me a cage and called it love. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Don't push me, Grace. You think you're clever, hiring lawyers, freezing accounts. You've made enemies you can't handle. You mean your father, she whispered. Adrian froze. What did you say? Her pulse spiked. She'd revealed too much. I know about the transfers. I know what you did with the charity money. He stared at her, realization dawning. You have something, don't you? Evidence. He lunged toward her desk. Grace darted between them, blocking his path. Get out, she said, her voice shaking. Where is it? He barked, shoving a vase aside. The sound of shattering glass filled the room. The vase, the one hiding the USB, crashed to the floor. His eyes flicked to it, widening. Grace's blood ran cold. Before he could move, she grabbed the USB, clutching it tight. You'll have to kill me first. Adrian's face twisted. Don't tempt me. The words hung heavy between them, charged with something darker than rage. For a second, Grace saw the man he truly was, not the husband, not the businessman, but the predator beneath the polish. Then, suddenly, a voice boomed from the doorway. Step away from her. Sal. Naomi stood there, phone in one hand, badge in the other. Behind her, 2 uniformed officers filled the hall. She had anticipated this visit. Adrian froze as the cops entered. What the hell is this? Protective order, Naomi said coolly. Filed this afternoon, effective immediately. You violated it the moment you stepped inside. The officers took him by the arms. Grace watched as Adrian struggled, yelling threats that no longer landed. The sound of metal cuffs snapped through the silence. As they led him out, he turned back, sneering. You think this is over? You'll regret this, Grace. You always do. The door closed behind them, leaving only the echo of rain. Grace sank to her knees, clutching the USB, her breath trembling. Naomi crouched beside her. You did everything right, she whispered. Grace shook her head. No. This is only the beginning. Outside, lightning split the sky open, because somewhere in the dark, Adrian wasn't planning to give up. He was planning his revenge. The morning after Adrian's arrest, Grace woke to silence, an unfamiliar kind of quiet that felt heavier than peace. The apartment smelled faintly of rain and broken glass. Her phone blinked with dozens of unread messages, missed calls, and news alerts. Naomi's text was the first she opened. Stay offline. Don't respond to anyone. They're going to twist the story, but it was too late. The storm had already begun. Her name was everywhere. Grace Miller. Pregnant socialite. Accused of manipulating husband. Every headline carried a different version of her humiliation. Some called her a scorned wife trying to destroy her successful husband. Others painted her as a fragile woman having a breakdown. The tabloids ran old photos from charity events, circling her smile like evidence of deceit. Grace's hands shook as she scrolled. There was even a leaked video of Adrian being escorted out of their apartment, his voice echoing through the hallway. She's crazy. She's trying to frame me. Someone had sold the footage to a gossip channel. By noon, her friends had turned silent. No calls from the women she dined with at the plaza. No comforting messages from the couples she and Adrian had vacationed with in the Hamptons. The social circle that once adored her was now pretending she didn't exist. When she finally checked her voicemail, one message made her stomach twist. Grace, it's Lindsay. I just wanted to say, I hope you get help. People are saying awful things, and I can't be involved. I'm sorry. A dull ache spread through her chest. She set the phone down, staring at the half-empty living room. Everything looked the same, the marble counters, the framed photographs, the glint of the city through tall windows, but everything felt false. Every gift, every dinner, every kind word had been built on her husband's power, not her worth. She needed air. At the River Cafe, the same place she and Adrian had celebrated their anniversary 2 years earlier, Grace sat alone at a corner table overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. The afternoon light shimmered over the water. But her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, pale, tired, but still unbroken. A waitress set down her tea and whispered, "Ignore the cameras, honey. They'll get bored." Grace looked up and saw 2 paparazzi outside, snapping through the window. She gave a small, weary nod. Her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "You think you've won? You have no idea who you're up against." Grace froze. The number was blocked. Adrian's threats echoed in her head. "You've made enemies you can't handle." She deleted the text and took a long, shaky breath. But before she could leave, another message appeared. This one was from Naomi. "Do not panic. We expected this. They're trying to isolate you. Stick to the plan." Grace typed back, "The plan feels impossible." Naomi replied instantly, "That's how you know it's working." Grace put her phone away and looked across the river, toward Manhattan's glittering skyline. Somewhere behind those glass towers, her enemies were tightening their grip, but she wasn't the same woman they thought they could break. As she walked out of the cafe, the paparazzi shouted her name. Flash after flash blinded her eyes. But this time, she didn't flinch. She kept walking, head high, past the shouting, past the lies. That night, she returned home to find an envelope slipped under her door. No address, no name. Just 3 words written in sharp black ink. "We're watching you." Her breath caught. She looked toward the window, but only the city lights stared back. Grace didn't know it yet, but the war against her wasn't just public, it was about to turn dangerously personal. The next morning, the world outside her window looked deceptively peaceful. Manhattan gleamed beneath the November sun, the city moving as if her life weren't collapsing in headlines. Grace hadn't slept. Every sound, the elevator hum, a car horn below, made her flinch. The threatening note from last night still sat on the kitchen counter, its black ink bleeding slightly where her tears had fallen. Naomi had offered to send security, but Grace refused. "If they want to scare me, they already have," she said. Yet she didn't feel brave, just numb. At 10 a.m., the intercom buzzed again. Her heart jumped. But this time, it wasn't a stranger's voice. "Miss Miller? It's Evelyn Hart from 27B. I baked too much pie. Thought you might want some company." "Sing." Grace hesitated before unlocking the door. Evelyn was her neighbor, elegant, silver-haired, always kind in passing. Today, she carried a small dish of apple pie and a warmth that filled the cold apartment. "You look pale, dear," Evelyn said gently. "I saw the news. People can be cruel. Don't let them make you smaller than you are." Grace forced a smile. "That's hard to do when they're everywhere." Evelyn sat at the marble table, her eyes sharp despite her softness. "I've lived in this building 30 years. I've seen more scandals than the evening news. You'll survive this too." Something in her tone made Grace pause. "You've seen Adrian before, haven't you?" Evelyn looked down at her tea. "Yes. I knew his father, actually. Raymond Cole. I worked for him a long time ago." Grace's heart skipped. "You worked for him?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "Back when I was an accountant for Cole Holdings. Before they pushed me into early retirement." Her voice turned bitter on the word pushed. "They called it downsizing. But really, I found something I wasn't supposed to." Grace leaned forward. "What did you find?" Evelyn hesitated, then reached into her leather purse. She pulled out a worn, brown notebook. The edges were yellowed, the pages lined with neat handwriting. "Ledgers," she said quietly. "Internal fund transfers from more than 15 years ago. I recognized the same patterns in the documents I saw mentioned on the news. They've been laundering money through shell charities since before you met Adrian." Grace's throat tightened. "Evelyn, this could expose everything." The older woman smiled sadly. "Yes, but it could also destroy me. I've kept this hidden for years, terrified they'd come after me if I spoke. But seeing you in those headlines, I couldn't stay silent." Tears filled Grace's eyes. "Why would you help me?" Evelyn reached across the table, taking her hand. Because I was you once. I loved a man who thought power made him untouchable. I didn't fight back, and I regretted it every day. You still have time to fight. Grace swallowed hard. If we give this to Naomi, she can link the old transfers to the new ones. It proves this wasn't just my husband. It was his entire family. Evelyn nodded. Then promise me one thing, dear. Don't let them twist the story again. You tell it first. Make them answer in public. Grace hugged her, the first human warmth she'd felt in weeks. Thank you, she whispered. As Evelyn left, Grace placed the notebook beside the USB on the table. 2 lifelines. 2 truths powerful enough to shatter an empire. Outside, sirens wailed faintly through the city. Grace stood by the window, looking out at the skyline that had once symbolized success and now represented everything she was about to dismantle. She didn't know if she'd win, but for the first time, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt ready to fight back. 2 days after Evelyn handed her the ledger, Grace woke to the sound of her phone vibrating nonstop. Dozens of notifications flooded the screen: emails, messages, missed calls from Naomi, and one from an unknown number with a subject line that froze her blood. Your husband's making a move. She opened it. Attached was a photo, grainy but unmistakable, of a man standing outside her building at 3 a.m., wearing a dark coat and hat, looking up at her window. Adrian. Grace's hands trembled. He was out. The restraining order meant nothing. By the time Naomi arrived, Grace had locked every door and pulled the blinds shut. He's not just angry, Naomi said after seeing the photo. He's desperate. The board suspended him yesterday. He's losing everything, and desperate men do stupid things. Grace nodded, her voice flat. So what now? He ruins me publicly while pretending to be the victim. Naomi hesitated. That's exactly what he's trying to do. 1. That afternoon, the internet exploded again. Adrian had given an exclusive interview to a business network, his voice calm and convincing. My wife's been manipulated, he said, eyes glistening with false pain. She's struggling emotionally, and certain people are exploiting her for money. I just want to protect my family. The clip went viral within hours. Sympathy poured in for him. Grace's inbox filled with hate messages calling her unstable, gold digger, liar. At sunset, Naomi called. We can't win this in silence anymore. It's time to go on offense. Grace hesitated. Expose everything. Not yet. We let him think he's winning, Naomi said. Meanwhile, I've got someone watching his next move. That night, Naomi's words proved true. Around midnight, Gabriel Stone, the tech CEO Grace once worked for, called unexpectedly. His voice was steady but urgent. Grace, it's Gabriel. I didn't want to interfere, but your husband just tried to contact one of my board members. He's asking them to leak internal reports about your charity's finances. Grace sank onto the couch. He's still trying to bury me. Gabriel hesitated, then added, I think it's time you stop defending yourself and start showing people who you really are. If you'll let me, I can help you tell your side. Grace's instinct was to refuse. She didn't want pity or charity. But something in Gabriel's tone was different. He wasn't offering rescue. He was offering strategy. Tomorrow, she said quietly. Let's talk tomorrow. The next morning, a new headline hit the media. Anonymous sources reveal CEO Cole's other woman paid with corporate funds. The photo of Tessa leaving the Ritz-Carlton plastered every major outlet. The leak was perfectly timed, fast, surgical, devastating. Grace stared at her screen, realization dawning. Gabriel had moved first. By noon, the company's stock had dropped 8%. Investors demanded an emergency meeting. Naomi called, almost laughing. Whoever leaked that just bought us time. Adrian's cornered. Grace leaned back, exhaling for the first time in days. Then, let's make it count. But just as relief touched her chest, her phone buzzed again, another unknown message. You think you can play games? Check your window. Her heart stopped. She turned toward the balcony. Outside, taped to the glass, was a photo of her and Gabriel taken earlier that morning. Private, intimate, impossible to have been captured without someone watching. Beneath it, scrawled in black marker, were the words, You're next. Grace's hands went cold. Adrian wasn't just losing his empire. He was unraveling, and he was coming for her. And somewhere in the shadows, someone else was helping him do it. The next day, Manhattan shimmered under a pale winter sun, but Grace felt no warmth. She hadn't slept after finding that photo taped to her window. Naomi had insisted she stay somewhere safer, yet Grace refused. "If I run, he wins," she'd said. Still, her nerves were stretched to breaking. Every sound felt amplified: the elevator's hum, the clink of a cup, even the whisper of her own thoughts. At noon, she met Gabriel Stone at the Plaza Hotel, the same ballroom where she'd once stood beside Adrian. The irony wasn't lost on her. Today, the hotel's golden chandeliers felt heavier, the air thicker. She wore a gray coat, minimal makeup, and sunglasses armor in another form. Gabriel was already waiting in the corner of the Palm Court, back straight, his phone face down beside a steaming cappuccino. When he saw her, he stood immediately, the old-fashioned kind of gesture that made her throat tighten. "You shouldn't have come here alone," he said softly. Grace tried to smile. "If Adrian's watching, I'd rather look fearless." He studied her face for a moment. "Fearless doesn't mean safe, Grace." They Saturday. The waiter poured water into crystal glasses, and for a moment, the clinking echoed like distant thunder. Gabriel leaned in. "I have connections at the Department of Justice. If what you have, those ledgers, the USB, is real, we can get you protection and immunity before they drag you into their mess." Grace hesitated. "I don't want to disappear behind lawyers. I want them to fall publicly. I want the world to see what they did." He nodded slowly. "Then we'll do it your way, but carefully. No emotional moves. You're not just his victim anymore. You're the evidence that can dismantle him." Her breath shook. "You sound like Naomi." "She's right," he said simply. "But she's fighting the law. I'm fighting optics." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He frowned, turning the screen toward her, a message with a single photo attached. It was of them, sitting at that very table. The caption read, "You're being watched." Grace's blood ran cold. She scanned the restaurant couples, tourists, waiters, but no one looked suspicious. Yet she could feel eyes on her, invisible and sharp. Gabriel motioned subtly for her to stay calm. "Smile," he whispered. "They want you to panic." She forced a small laugh, lifting her cup. "Is this where you tell me it's just business?" He smiled faintly. "No, this is where I tell you that Adrian's running out of cards. People like him only know how to control by fear. Once fear stops working, they crumble." She looked down, her hand trembling slightly. "He's already trying to destroy what's left of my life. My friends, my reputation. Reputation can be rebuilt." Gabriel interrupted. "Integrity can't. You still have that." For the first time in weeks, Grace felt something crack through her despair, a flicker of hope. When the check arrived, Gabriel paid before she could argue. "Call Naomi tonight. Tell her I'll send my firm's internal security to watch your building." Quietly. She hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because 10 years ago, you believed in me when I'd just lost everything. You told me failure wasn't fatal. I guess I'm returning the favor." The emotion hit her harder than she expected. She blinked fast, whispering, "Thank you." They walked outside together. The cold air bit at her cheeks, the sky bruised with early dusk. As they reached the curb, Gabriel turned to her. "Whatever happens next, don't face it alone again." Before she could answer, a black SUV slowed at the corner. A tinted window rolled down just enough for her to see Adrian's eyes watching from the back seat. Grace froze. Gabriel stepped forward instinctively, blocking her view. The SUV sped off, leaving behind the faint smell of gasoline and dread. Grace gripped his arm. "He's following me." Gabriel's jaw clenched. Then he just made his biggest mistake. Because now, Adrian Cole wasn't just fighting his wife, he was fighting someone who had the power to end him. By the next morning, Manhattan's business district was humming with whispers. The media had turned Adrian's scandal into a feeding frenzy. Screens on Wall Street flashed, Cole Holdings under investigation. Grace watched it unfold from her living room, coffee untouched, fingers gripping her phone. Naomi had warned her that once the public smelled blood, it would spiral fast. But Grace didn't know the half of it yet. Her phone buzzed, Gabriel calling. "It's happening," he said. "The SEC just opened an inquiry. They're freezing the company's accounts pending review." Adrian's scrambling. Grace's heart raced. "So it's working?" "For now," Gabriel said. "But you need to prepare yourself. When men like Raymond Cole are cornered, they don't go down quietly. They take everyone with them." As if on cue, her phone lit up with an unknown number. Against Naomi's advice, Grace answered. "Grace." Raymond Cole's voice drawled, smooth and icy. "We need to talk." Her stomach tightened. "There's nothing left to say." "Oh, I think there is," he said. "You've made this family an enemy of yours. I suggest you reconsider before you find yourself without one." Are you threatening me?" "I'm reminding you," he said, his voice lowering, "that the world believes what I tell it to believe. You, on the other hand, are just a trembling woman who can't keep her husband in line." Grace hung up before he could finish. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes burned with anger instead of fear. She forwarded the call log to Naomi. Within seconds, the lawyer replied, "Perfect. Recorded threats. Keep everything." At noon, the war went public. Adrian and his father held a press conference inside the Cole Holdings tower. Grace watched live on CNBC. Both men stood behind a podium adorned with the company's gold logo. Their smiles were composed, rehearsed. "My wife is unwell," Adrian said to the cameras. "She's being manipulated by outsiders trying to profit from this family's success. The allegations are false, and the evidence she claims to have is fabricated." Reporters shouted questions, flashes blinding the screen. Raymond leaned toward the microphone. "We'll be taking legal action against anyone spreading slander. This will end soon." Grace's chest constricted. They were flipping the narrative, turning her into the villain again. Then, something caught her eye. Naomi standing at the back of the room. Her phone was raised, recording. Grace smiled through tears. Naomi was gathering their lies live, on record. That evening, Grace met Naomi and Gabriel in a glass-walled conference room on the 54th floor of Gabriel's tech firm overlooking Fifth Avenue. The skyline stretched behind them like a battlefield. Naomi tossed her phone onto the table. "They made their move. Now we make ours." She turned to Gabriel. "We leaked the financial discrepancies Evelyn found anonymously through independent journalists. Once the data's out, they can't spin it." Gabriel nodded. "And I'll have my cybersecurity team trace where the funds went. If we can prove Cayman connections, the DOJ will have no choice but to open a criminal case." Grace exhaled, the first deep breath in days. "Then it's over." Naomi hesitated. "Not yet. Adrian's desperate." "Grace, he still has resources, and I just got word he's hiring a private investigator. They'll try to discredit Evelyn. Maybe even you." Grace looked out the window. The city shimmered like fire below. "Then let them come," she whispered. "I've lived in his shadow long enough." Gabriel studied her, a flicker of admiration softening his expression. "You sound like someone ready for war." Grace turned back, her voice calm, steady, unflinching. "I am." And as the lights of Manhattan reflected against the glass, she knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming her name, one headline, one truth, one reckoning at a time. 3 days after the press conference, the tension in Manhattan was electric. Grace's every step felt watched. Reporters camped outside her building. Online, hashtags like #Grace the Manipulator trended for the 3rd day in a row. But Naomi kept her focused. "Noise doesn't matter," she said. "Evidence does." That afternoon, Grace met Naomi in a quiet cafe near Bryant Park. The lawyer looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, a phone glued to her hand. "We're close," Naomi whispered. "My contact at the DOJ confirmed that the Cole accounts in the Cayman Islands are active. But someone's trying to delete the records." Grace frowned. "Who?" Naomi hesitated. "Someone inside the Justice Department. A leak. Raymond has more friends than I thought." Before Grace could respond, Naomi's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then her expression changed. "You need to go home now," she said urgently. Adrian filed a countersuit defamation and emotional distress. "He's demanding a psychiatric evaluation." Grace froze. "He's calling me crazy." Naomi's voice hardened. He's trying to prove you're unstable so the court won't trust your testimony. It's a classic tactic. We'll fight it." That night, Grace returned home, drained and trembling. The apartment felt colder, emptier. She poured herself a glass of water, then noticed something, her office door slightly ajar. She was certain she'd locked it. Cautiously, she pushed it open. Her desk drawers had been rifled through. Papers scattered across the floor. The USB and Evelyn's ledger were gone. Her stomach dropped. She grabbed her phone and called Naomi. "It's gone, everything." Naomi swore softly. "I'll send a team right now. Don't touch anything. We'll check the building cameras." But just as Grace hung up, the intercom buzzed. "Miss Miller, delivery for you." Her pulse spiked. "From who?" The doorman paused. "No sender listed. Just a black envelope." Against her better judgment, she told him to send it up. Moments later, a courier left it at her door. Inside was a single sheet of paper, thick and smooth, embossed with the Cole Holdings logo. "You should have stayed silent." Grace's hands shook. On the back, written in bold ink, was a single address: Cole Tower. Conference room, 7B. Tomorrow, noon. The next morning, Naomi tried to stop her from going. "It's a trap," she said. "I know," Grace replied, slipping on her coat. "But traps only work if the prey's afraid." Cole Tower loomed over Fifth Avenue like a monument to greed. The elevator ride to the 7th floor felt endless. When the doors opened, Adrian was already waiting, flanked by 2 security guards. He looked calmer than she'd seen him in weeks, his smile unnervingly polite. "Grace," he greeted, gesturing to a chair. "No lawyers today. Just us." She didn't sit. "Where's my evidence?" He leaned back, tapping a folder against the table. "Safe, but you should thank me. I had to convince my father not to turn it over to the press. Imagine what they'd say about you if those documents were found in your desk." Grace felt fury ignite in her chest. "You broke into my home." He shrugged. "It's my name on the lease." Before she could answer, the conference room door opened and Naomi walked in. Grace's heart stopped. Adrian smiled wider. "You didn't think she worked for you alone, did you?" Naomi didn't look at her. She set a stack of documents on the table. "Sign the non-disclosure agreement, Grace. Walk away now." "It's over." Grace stared at her, disbelief crushing her breath. "You sold me out?" Naomi's eyes flickered sadness, guilt, something else. "I'm sorry." Adrian leaned forward. "If you stay silent, we'll make sure the world forgets your name. But if you keep fighting, you'll be the one in handcuffs." Grace clenched her fists, fighting tears. Then she noticed something. A tiny flash of red light on Naomi's pen recording. Her heart skipped. "Naomi's faking it." Grace forced her voice steady. "You'll regret this, Adrian." He smirked. "I already have everything I want." But as Naomi gathered the documents, she whispered just loud enough for Grace to hear. "Trust me." And that was the moment Grace realized betrayal wasn't the end of the game. It was the beginning of their trap. The next 48 hours felt like years. Naomi vanished completely. No calls, no texts, no trace. Grace paced her apartment like a ghost, sleepless and suspicious. Had she truly been betrayed again, or was Naomi's whispered, "Trust me," a coded signal? Every theory twisted inside her mind until she could barely tell fear from paranoia. Then, on the morning of the 3rd day, Naomi reappeared. Grace opened her door to find the lawyer standing there in jeans and a hoodie, eyes sharp but exhausted. "Pack a bag," Naomi said. "We're going to Washington." Grace blinked. "What?" Naomi closed the door behind her. "The DOJ's Financial Crimes Unit. I've been feeding them everything for weeks. Adrian and his father thought they were paying me off. But I was working with the feds. The pen recorder got their entire conversation on file. You're officially protected under federal witness immunity." Grace's knees went weak. "You were undercover?" "Half of it was my idea, half theirs," Naomi said with a tired grin. "I just made sure the ending belonged to us." They took the early train to D.C. Naomi explained the plan. She'd deliver the files and recordings personally, while Grace stayed out of public view. The USB and Evelyn's ledger had been copied before Adrian's break-in. Everything, every transfer, every forged signature was backed up on encrypted drives. At noon, Inside a secure DOJ office, Naomi handed the evidence to a special agent. Grace watched as her entire nightmare became a federal case file. Cole Holdings, Raymond Cole, Adrian Cole, the agent said, flipping through pages. Money laundering, tax evasion, falsified charity donations. This is big. Grace exhaled shakily. So it's real. They can't erase it anymore. The agent nodded. They'll try, but the investigation's already public record. Once this hits, no one can silence it. 1. By evening, news broke nationwide. Federal investigation opens into Cole Holdings scandal. Major outlets splashed photos of Adrian and Raymond across their homepages. The empire that once ruled Manhattan's upper circle was cracking wide open. But victory didn't taste sweet yet. Grace knew Adrian would fight back with everything he had left. And she was right. The next morning, her phone rang. It was Gabriel. Grace, are you sitting down? She tensed. What happened? Raymond staged a suicide attempt, Gabriel said. He's alive, but the company's lawyers are using it to delay the investigation. They're calling him a sick old man being persecuted by a vengeful daughter-in-law. It's working. The media's turning again. Grace's blood ran cold. They're going to use sympathy as a shield. Exactly. But we can counter it. Remember the conference call recordings Evelyn mentioned? The ones she said were archived on old hard drives? If we can find those, they'll prove this operation started long before you joined the family. Grace nodded slowly. Then we find them. Hours later, Gabriel drove her and Naomi to Evelyn's old townhouse in Brooklyn. Dust filled the air as they climbed the narrow staircase to the attic. Boxes lined the walls, labeled in fading ink. Grace's heart pounded as she opened one marked Cole 2008-2010. Inside, beneath stacks of files, was a small external hard drive wrapped in plastic. Naomi connected it to her laptop. Static crackled, then a voice Raymond's filled the room. Move the funds under the charity account. Grace Miller's name gives us cover. Grace's stomach twisted. She hadn't even met Adrian then. They'd planned to use her years before she'd walked down the aisle. Naomi looked up, eyes wide. This changes everything. Within hours, the new recordings were sent to the DOJ. Grace stood by the window, watching the Brooklyn skyline blur through the glass. The world was finally seeing the truth, but she knew Adrian wouldn't surrender easily. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won? Look outside. She turned toward the street. A black SUV idled by the curb, headlights cutting through the dusk. Naomi stepped beside her. He's panicking, she said. That means we're close. Grace's hands tightened into fists. Then it's time to finish this, because for the first time, the hunter was about to become the hunted. By the time dawn broke over Manhattan, the Cole empire was bleeding. Cable news played a constant loop of agents escorting Raymond Cole out of his Park Avenue penthouse. The FBI's warrant had gone public overnight, and the family name once synonymous with power and respect was now headline poison. Grace sat in Gabriel's office, overlooking the skyline, coffee growing cold beside her. The city glimmered like nothing had changed, but everything had. Screens flashed with breaking news banners. Cole Holdings stock crashes 27% amid federal investigation. Another headline followed. Anonymous source confirms internal fraud spanning over a decade. That anonymous source, of course, was Naomi. Gabriel looked up from his laptop. It's official. The DOJ froze all their domestic accounts this morning. Adrian's assets are under review. He's broke. Grace. She didn't smile. He's never broke. Men like him keep money where no one can find it. Gabriel's eyes softened. Maybe. But this time, he won't have time to enjoy it. Naomi entered the room, her expression grim but satisfied. Raymond's pretending to cooperate, but he's selling his son out to save himself. Adrian's been subpoenaed to testify in 48 hours. Hide? Grace's chest tightened. He won't show, he'll run. Naomi smirked faintly. That's what the marshals are for. But later that afternoon, Naomi's phone rang and her face turned pale. You were right, she whispered after hanging up. He's gone. He missed his pre-hearing check-in. His GPS monitor's been removed. Grace's pulse spiked. Where is he? Last signal placed him near the river, heading toward the private docks. Gabriel grabbed his keys. We're not letting him disappear again. Mayman. Minutes later, their Mercedes raced through lower Manhattan toward the waterfront. The air was heavy with salt and smoke as they reached the docks, a long row of yachts swaying against the tide. The wind whipped Grace's hair as she scanned the horizon. Then she saw him. Adrian, in a dark jacket, phone pressed to his ear, barking into it as two men loaded suitcases onto a small boat. Naomi called the marshals, but Grace stepped forward, her voice low and steady. Let me handle this. Buddy. Gabriel tried to stop her. Grace. She shook her head. He started this with me. He ends it with me. She walked down the pier, heels echoing against the wood. Adrian turned when he heard her. For a moment, surprise flickered in his eyes. Then disdain. You should have stayed out of this, he hissed. You had everything, and you threw it away for revenge. Grace stopped a few feet away. Revenge? No, Adrian, justice. He laughed bitterly. Justice doesn't exist, only leverage. And you lost yours. He gestured toward the boat. You think the FBI scares me? I built people like them. Grace's eyes glinted. Then you should have built a better firewall. She held up her phone, pressing play. Adrian's own voice echoed from the recording. Naomi had captured every threat, every confession, every word that tied him to the fraud. His face drained of color. Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue lights flashed across the water. Adrian's head snapped toward them, panic breaking through his arrogance for the first time. You called them? He shouted. Grace didn't answer. She simply stepped aside as agents poured down the dock, shouting commands. Adrian turned to run, but Gabriel intercepted him, blocking his path. The two men locked eyes, a silent understanding that this moment was the end. The agents surrounded Adrian, pushing him against the railing. Handcuffs clicked. Cameras from nearby news crews captured everything the once untouchable CEO dragged away in disgrace. As they led him off, Adrian looked back at Grace, eyes blazing. You think this makes you clean? You'll never be free of me. She met his glare calmly. I already am. That night, news anchors replayed the arrest on loop. Adrian Cole, son of disgraced magnate Raymond Cole, taken into custody after attempted flight from federal charges. Pie. Grace watched in silence from Gabriel's penthouse balcony. Below her, the city pulsed with life again, uncaring and endless. Naomi joined her, handing over a glass of water. It's over, Naomi said softly. Grace looked out over the lights. No, she whispered. It's just beginning. Because the empire had fallen, but now it was time to rebuild something real from its ashes. 2 weeks after Adrian's arrest, the storm finally began to quiet. But the silence it left behind was strange and heavy. The world had moved on to new scandals, new names to dissect, but Grace's life still felt like the echo of a collapsed building. The investigation was ongoing. Raymond had turned state's witness, and the Cole dynasty existed now only as courtroom gossip. Yet even in ruin, Adrian's shadow stretched long. That morning, Naomi called with news that froze Grace mid-sip of her coffee. He wants to see you, the lawyer said. Grace frowned. Adrian? He's filed a request through his defense team. He says it's a private matter. I can deny it if you want. Grace hesitated. Part of her wanted to shut the door forever. But another part, the part still haunted by years of his manipulation, wanted to face him one last time. Set it up, she said quietly. That afternoon, she walked through the gray halls of the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. Everything smelled of disinfectant and stale air. Naomi accompanied her until the guard signaled she had to go in alone. 5 minutes, he said, opening the metal door. Adrian sat behind a scratched glass partition. He looked older, his skin pale, his hair unkempt, but his eyes still held that dangerous spark of control. He lifted the phone slowly, a faint smirk tugging at his mouth. Grace, he said, voice low and familiar. You look peaceful. Almost like you miss me. She didn't respond. What do you want? He leaned forward. I wanted you to hear it from me before you read it in court. My father made a deal. He's testifying, and I'm the sacrifice. They'll lock me up for years. You deserve every second, she said coldly. He chuckled softly. Maybe. But here's the funny part, they still can't touch the offshore accounts. The money's gone, Grace. Every cent. You destroyed the company, but you'll never find the rest. Grace's stomach tightened. You think I care about your money? Adrian tilted his head. You should. Half of it's in your name. If you think the government won't come after you for that, you're naive. She felt the blood drain from her face. Naomi had warned her about this possibility, but hearing it from him made it real. I don't believe you, she said. Believe what you want, he smirked. I came here to give you a chance. Sign an affidavit saying I acted alone, and I'll transfer everything out of your name. Refuse, and the IRS will drag you down with me. Grace stared at him, heart pounding. You're trying to blackmail me from prison? I'm offering you redemption, he said with mock sincerity. You can be free, Grace. Just admit you're the helpless woman they think you are. Something inside her snapped. She leaned closer to the glass, voice shaking but fierce. You built your kingdom on my silence. You used my name, my life, my love. But I'm not helpless anymore, and I'm not afraid of you. Adrian's smile faltered. For the first time, she saw uncertainty behind his arrogance. She stood, placing the phone back on its hook. Enjoy your cell, Adrian. You'll have plenty of time to think about all the things you lost that money can't buy. Before leaving, she turned to the guard. Can I get a copy of the recording from this meeting? The guard nodded. It's automatic. Duh. Grace smiled faintly. She didn't need his threats. She had his confession. Back outside, Naomi was waiting. How did it go? Grace handed her the visitor slip. Better than expected. He just gave us what we needed. That evening, Naomi sent the recording to the prosecutors. Adrian's voice filled the room boasting about offshore accounts, confirming his father's deal. It was damning, final, irreversible. Grace sat quietly, staring out the window as Manhattan's skyline glowed like fire against the dusk. For the first time, she didn't feel anger or fear. She felt release. Because redemption wasn't something Adrian could offer, it was something she'd already taken back. The morning of the gala felt unreal, like stepping into a life that used to belong to someone else. It was hosted at the Plaza Hotel, the same glittering ballroom where, months earlier, Grace had endured humiliation while Adrian played the loving husband before the cameras. But this time, the invitation bore her name. Grace Miller, honored speaker. Transparency and philanthropy. Naomi had planned every detail, ensuring that Grace's first public appearance since the trial would send a message. She wasn't just surviving, she was reclaiming everything that had been stolen from her. The city buzzed with the aftermath of the Coles' downfall. Adrian's final plea deal had been accepted the previous week, 10 years in federal prison, no parole for financial fraud and obstruction of justice. Raymond had quietly entered witness protection, his name erased from the business world he'd once ruled. And the frozen assets, after months of investigation, had been divided between victims and charity organizations. Grace's name was cleared of all involvement. Still, as she stood before the mirror, smoothing the midnight blue gown Naomi had insisted she wear, her hands trembled slightly. "You're sure I should do this?" she asked. Naomi smiled in the reflection. "Grace, this isn't about revenge anymore. It's about presence. You show them that you exist outside of what they did to you." Gabriel appeared in the doorway, straightening his tuxedo. "And if you're nervous," he said softly, "remember this, you don't owe anyone an apology. They owe you acknowledgement." Grace met his eyes, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "Then let's give them something they'll never forget." The ballroom shimmered with golden light and murmured anticipation as Grace entered. Heads turned. Conversations paused. She felt every stare, some curious, some admiring, a few still skeptical. At the front, cameras flashed. The press couldn't resist the story of the fallen wife turned whistleblower. When the host announced her name, applause rippled across the room. Grace walked up the marble steps toward the stage, her heels clicking like steady heartbeats. She gripped the podium, took a breath, and began. "I once believed transparency was something you demanded from others," she said, her voice calm but resonant. "But I've learned it starts with yourself, with facing the truth even when it destroys everything you thought you had." The crowd quieted. "I spent years living in the shadow of power, mistaking control for love, wealth for safety. When the truth came, It didn't set me free right away. It broke me. But sometimes breaking is the only way to rebuild with integrity. Cameras flashed. People leaned forward, drawn in. Grace continued, steady and clear. Today isn't about my pain. It's about the people who lose their voices in rooms like this, women who are silenced, shamed, or made to believe that standing up means losing everything. I'm here to tell you standing up means finding yourself. The room erupted in applause. Even the journalists who once smeared her reputation stood clapping. Gabriel watched from the front row, pride softening his usual stoic expression. Naomi wiped a discreet tear. For the first time, Grace didn't feel like a survivor performing strength. She simply was strong. As the event ended, a reporter approached her. "Miss Miller," he asked, "if you could say one thing to Adrian Cole today, what would it be?" Grace paused, then smiled faintly. "Thank you," she said. "Because losing him gave me back everything real." That quote would headline every major outlet the next day. Grace Miller's comeback. From scandal to strength. Later, on the balcony overlooking Central Park, Gabriel joined her. The city glittered beneath them, endless and alive. "You did it," he said quietly. Grace turned toward him, eyes glistening. "No," she said softly. "We did." He smiled, taking her hand gently. "So what comes next?" She looked out at the lights of New York, feeling peace for the first time in years. "Something honest," she whispered. Because tonight wasn't just a victory, it was the rebirth of everything she thought she'd lost. The morning after the gala, New York City felt new, like the skyline itself had taken a breath. Newspapers displayed Grace's speech on their front pages. Her words had struck a chord far beyond Manhattan's glittering circles. Standing up means finding yourself. It was already trending nationwide. But for Grace, victory was never just about applause. She knew that in stories like hers, monsters didn't vanish quietly, they lingered in the dark, waiting for a chance to claw back control. That chance came 3 days later. Naomi called early, her voice sharp with urgency. "Grace, Adrian's lawyers just filed an appeal." Grace froze. "Appeal? On what grounds?" "Coerced confession," Naomi said bitterly. "He's claiming emotional manipulation, blaming the stress of your divorce, and the investigation. He's painting himself as a broken man who made mistakes under pressure." Grace laughed bitterly. "He's still playing the victim. Worse," Naomi said, "he's requesting a public statement from you, asking you to acknowledge that you forgave him. It's a media ploy. He's trying to win sympathy before sentencing." Grace's stomach twisted. Forgiveness isn't what he wants, it's control. "Exactly," Naomi replied. "So we don't give him that. We hit harder." Later that afternoon, Grace met Gabriel and Naomi in the conference room at Gabriel's firm. The glass walls reflected the Manhattan skyline, cold and sharp against the gray clouds. Naomi spread out documents across the table. "We've gathered every trace of his offshore activity. But there's something more, a missing piece we didn't catch before." She slid forward a folder marked "Confidential." "Audio transcripts, MDC Brooklyn." Grace's eyes widened. "The prison recordings?" Naomi nodded. "All inmate calls are recorded. Adrian made over 30 in the last month. Listen to this one." She pressed play. Adrian's voice crackled through the speaker, low and venomous. "She thinks she's safe now, but everyone has a price. I just have to find hers." Grace's breath caught. Gabriel's jaw tightened. "He's threatening you again, even from prison." Naomi nodded. "This is what we take to the judge. It voids his appeal before it even begins." Grace's pulse steadied. "Let's end this." The next day, the courtroom buzzed with tension. The press packed every seat, cameras flashing as Adrian was escorted in, shackled but still smirking. He looked thinner, paler, but the arrogance remained. When Grace entered, whispers rippled across the room. She walked past him without looking. Dressed simply in a white blouse and navy suit. No glamour, no revenge, just composure. Adrian leaned toward his lawyer, murmuring something that made him smirk. Grace didn't care. Today wasn't about emotion. It was about truth. The judge called the session to order. Naomi stood, presenting the new evidence. The courtroom filled with Adrian's voice from the recording, echoing across the silent chamber. "She thinks she's safe now. But everyone has a price. Tree. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Adrian's smirk vanished. The judge's gavel struck sharply. Mr. Cole, this recording clearly demonstrates ongoing harassment and intent to intimidate a protected witness. Your appeal is hereby denied. Adrian shot to his feet, shouting, "You can't do this. She ruined me." Grace finally turned to face him, her voice calm and clear. "No, Adrian, you ruined yourself." The bailiff forced him back down. The gavel struck again. It was over. As she left the courthouse, flashes exploded like fireworks. Reporters shouted questions. "Grace, how do you feel now that it's finished?" She stopped briefly, her breath visible in the cold air. "Free," she said simply, "completely free." Gabriel met her outside, holding a small white envelope. "This came for you at the office," he said. Inside was a note written in Naomi's handwriting. "Justice isn't loud, it's permanent." Attached was a newspaper clipping. Adrian Cole sentenced to 10 years, no parole. Solitary confinement recommended for security reasons. Grace smiled faintly, tucking it into her coat pocket. The wind carried the city's familiar hum around her taxis, chatter, life moving on. For the first time, the sound didn't make her flinch. Gabriel looked at her. "What will you do now?" Grace glanced at the courthouse behind her, then toward the wide skyline ahead. "Live," she said softly. "Finally live." Because the final blow wasn't his punishment, it was her peace. Winter melted slowly into spring, and for the first time in years, Grace didn't wake to dread. The city that once haunted her now hummed with quiet possibility. Manhattan's skyline still glittered outside her new apartment window, but it no longer represented the cold ambition of her past. It was simply beautiful, a place to begin again. 3 months had passed since Adrian's sentencing. The world had moved on. The tabloids found new scandals, new faces to dissect. Occasionally, Grace's name still surfaced. From scandal to strength, the woman who exposed the Coles. But now, she didn't feel anger when she saw it. She felt distance. Her life was no longer a headline, it was her own. One crisp morning, Grace sat at a corner table in a quiet cafe near Central Park. A cup of hot chai steamed beside her laptop as she drafted the proposal for her new nonprofit. The Heart Foundation, named after Evelyn, her late neighbor whose courage had helped bring down an empire. Her vision was simple: financial education and legal support for women trapped in manipulative marriages. Protection through knowledge, the tagline read. Every word came from experienced pain transformed into purpose. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and Gabriel walked in, his coat dusted with snow. He spotted her instantly, smiling with that calm confidence that had become her anchor. "You've been ignoring my calls," he teased, pulling out a chair. Grace laughed softly. "I've been busy trying to change the world. What's your excuse?" He handed her a white envelope. "An investor proposal. From me. I want in." She raised an eyebrow. "You already help enough." He shook his head. "You're building something that matters. I want to be part of it, not as a favor, but as faith." Her eyes softened. "You've already given me that." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the hum of the cafe blending with the soft rustle of pages and laughter around them. It was so ordinary, so normal, and that was what made it extraordinary. Later that afternoon, they walked together through Central Park, snow melting into puddles along the pathways. Grace wore a simple beige coat and a small smile that reached her eyes. Gabriel carried a paper bag with 2 coffees and a dog treat. He'd adopted a golden retriever from a shelter a month ago. "I forgot what peace felt like," Grace admitted quietly. Gabriel looked at her. "You didn't forget. You just had to earn it." They stopped by the Bethesda fountain, where the angel statue gleamed under the pale sunlight. Grace took a slow breath, remembering all the nights she'd stood at windows just like this, waiting, crying, surviving. Now, there was only stillness. "You know," Gabriel said, "I read somewhere that the first real sign of healing isn't forgiveness, it's indifference." She smiled. "Then I must be healing fast. I barely think about him anymore." He grinned. "Good, because you have better things ahead." That evening, they returned to her apartment, where boxes of foundation documents filled the living room. Naomi stopped by with takeout and a bottle of wine. The three of them, once bound by survival, now laughed like old friends. To the end of monsters. Naomi toasted. Grace raised her glass. And the beginning of meaning. As the night settled, Gabriel lingered by the door before leaving. "There's something I want to ask," he said quietly. Grace tilted her head. "What?" He hesitated, then smiled. "Dinner. Not as allies. As two people who made it out alive." Grace's laugh was soft, genuine. "You're sure you want to date someone with a past that made national news?" He stepped closer, eyes kind. "I'm not afraid of your past. I'm interested in your future." For the first time in years, her heart didn't race from fear but from possibility. As the door closed behind him, Grace looked out the window at the lights of New York City. The skyline no longer loomed, it shone. Because healing wasn't forgetting, it was finally remembering who she was before the pain. 6 months later, summer rolled across Manhattan like a slow, forgiving breath. Grace stood in front of a sleek glass building on Madison Avenue, the new headquarters of the Heart Foundation. The sign gleamed under the morning sun, her name etched quietly beneath the logo. The moment felt surreal. The same city that once watched her fall now watched her rise again. Inside, the office buzzed with soft conversation and the scent of fresh paint. A framed photo of Evelyn Hart sat on the reception desk, her kind smile frozen in time. Grace touched the frame lightly. "We did it, Evelyn," she whispered. "We really did it." The foundation had grown faster than anyone expected. Donations poured in from women across the country, executives, teachers, single mothers, each letter carrying a story of survival. Grace read everyone, some handwritten, some emailed, all sharing the same refrain. "You gave me courage." Naomi entered, holding 2 Starbucks coffees and a grin. "Your 10 a.m. board meeting is full donors, legal reps, even a few from D.C. You're officially important." Grace chuckled. "I'll settle for useful." Naomi set the coffee down. "You're more than useful. You turned your pain into a system. That's power." Before Grace could reply, the elevator doors opened, and Gabriel stepped out, his tie loosened, phone in hand. "Sorry, I'm late," he said. "Traffic on 5th is a war zone." Naomi smirked. "You're always late. But at least you brought the data." He handed Grace a folder. The foundation's first 6 months. 214 women supported, 47 legal settlements, 5 new safe housing programs funded. "You're making real change." Grace flipped through the pages, eyes softening. "It's not just me. We did this together." Naomi leaned against the desk. "You know, the Attorney General's office called this morning. They're using your case as an example in training for financial abuse investigations. You're becoming a symbol." Grace smiled faintly. "Symbols are for magazines. I just want the next woman who's scared to know there's a number she can call." Chime. As they moved into the conference room, the walls gleamed with framed newspaper clippings and photos from events, women hugging, teams of lawyers smiling. One photo caught Grace's eye. A candid shot from the gala, her hand clasped in Gabriel's as they laughed under golden light. She hadn't realized someone captured it. The meeting went long but left her energized. As the last donor left, Naomi lingered. "There's something else," she said carefully. "Adrian's appeal for early parole was officially denied today." Grace paused. "He tried again?" Naomi nodded. "Yes, but the court cited his ongoing behavior as evidence he's still a threat. He won't be out for a long time." Grace exhaled slowly. "Then maybe justice really does last." Naomi smiled. "It does, when it's earned." Later that afternoon, Grace and Gabriel walked through Central Park, the summer air filled with children's laughter and the scent of blooming lilacs. For once, the world around her matched the peace inside. Gabriel stopped by a bench near the fountain and turned to her. "You know, you've built something that matters, but I think it's missing one thing." She raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "Grace Miller," he said softly, "you've spent so long fighting for everyone else's future. Maybe it's time to build one for yourself. With me." Send. Tears welled in her eyes. For a heartbeat, the city vanished, the noise, the past, the pain, and only the man before her remained. She whispered, voice trembling, "Yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, The diamond caught the afternoon sun, scattering light across the water. The applause of nearby strangers faded into the hum of the city that had once broken her and now bore witness to her rebirth. Grace leaned against Gabriel's shoulder, watching the skyline glow. Because true justice wasn't just punishment, it was building something beautiful after the ashes. It was a quiet Sunday morning when Grace woke to the sound of soft rain against her window. The city outside her Upper West Side apartment was wrapped in mist, the skyline blurring like an oil painting. For once, Manhattan wasn't roaring, it was whispering, as if it too understood that some battles were finally over. Gabriel was still asleep beside her, his arm draped protectively across her waist. The engagement ring caught a faint glimmer of light as she slipped gently out of bed. She made her way to the kitchen, poured coffee into 2 mugs, and opened her laptop on the counter. The Heart Foundation's website glowed softly on the screen, displaying the words that had become her compass: courage, clarity, control. She checked the morning emails, one from Naomi, titled, "Good News." The message was short but powerful. Raymond Cole officially sentenced. Assets redistributed. The system worked. Grace smiled faintly. It wasn't triumph she felt anymore, just peace. Justice had finally completed its circle. She took her coffee to the balcony. The rain had slowed to a mist, and the city lights shimmered through it like stars fallen to earth. Below, joggers passed by Central Park, umbrellas dotted the sidewalks, and life went on unaware of the woman who had once brought down a dynasty from an apartment just like this. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "You're up early again," Gabriel said, stepping out in a gray t-shirt, still sleepy but smiling. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "My mind was loud, but in a good way this time." He kissed her forehead. "You're allowed to have quiet now, you know. You don't have to keep fighting ghosts." Grace nodded. "I know. But sometimes I still think about her, the woman I used to be. The one who stayed silent because she thought love meant endurance." Gabriel leaned on the railing beside her. "You saved her, Grace. Every woman you help now, that's her healing too." She looked out at the skyline, the Empire State Building, faint through the fog. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd never found that USB? He smiled. "Then, someone else would have found it. Because the truth doesn't stay buried forever." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the rain. The world felt clean again. Later that day, they met Naomi at the River Cafe, the same restaurant where Grace had once eaten alone, humiliated and watched by paparazzi. Today, the only cameras were tourists snapping photos of the Brooklyn Bridge. Naomi looked radiant, her once hard edges softened. "Guess who's getting a federal commendation next week?" she said, grinning. Grace laughed. "You deserve it. You risked everything." Naomi sipped her espresso. "So did you. We both learned something, didn't we? Justice isn't about punishment. It's about restoration." Gabriel raised his glass. "To restoration." They toasted, and for a moment, everything felt simple, real, human. As the afternoon faded, Grace walked along the waterfront alone for a few minutes. The air smelled of salt and rain. She stopped by the railing, watching the river move steady, unstoppable, cleansing. She took a deep breath and whispered, "I forgive you, not for Adrian's sake, but for her own." The wind carried the words away, dissolving them into the city's heartbeat. When she returned home that evening, a small white envelope waited by the door. No name, no address, just 2 words. For Evelyn. Inside was a donation confirmation for $1 million made anonymously to the Heart Foundation. Grace smiled through tears. Somewhere out there, someone had understood what Evelyn's legacy meant. She turned off the lights, drew the curtains, and settled beside Gabriel. The city pulsed quietly outside, endless, alive, forgiving. Her story had started with betrayal, burned through humiliation and pain, and ended not in vengeance, but in peace. Because real victory isn't destroying what hurt you. It's building something that can never be broken again. So, that's how Grace's story comes to an end. And if you're still here with us right now, maybe something in her journey has quietly touched your heart too. Because deep down, we've all been Grace at some point. Trying to find peace after betrayal, strength after breaking, and love after loss. Her story reminds us that healing doesn't mean forgetting the pain. It means learning to carry it differently. Like the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle is the way." Every wound, every fall, can become the path to wisdom if we choose to face it instead of running from it. Grace didn't win because she destroyed her enemies. She won because she rebuilt herself, stronger, clearer, and kinder. So, maybe tonight, wherever you are, take a quiet breath and ask yourself, what part of me needs to rise again? Remember, peace isn't something we find, it's something we create. If Grace's story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel. Because here, we believe that even after the darkest night, there's always another sunrise waiting, just for you.